Hi, and welcome to the Guest List podcast. I am your host, Steve Guest, and this is another solo episode. Today, I just want to focus on what I suppose I would call self-assessment or reflection or self-reflection. And I kind of get into this thought process every year. This is the final quarter of 2021. And as a recruiter, as a salesperson, I always go into this quarter wanting to firstly end the year on a high and do well and look to achieve the targets and the goals that I've set out. But also I see it as the practice run and the lead into having a great year next year in 2022. And those of you that know me will always know that I go into every single year and have done for years upon years, knowing or wanting that next year to be the best year ever. I always want the next year to be better than the year before because, as you all know, it's about continual improvement. It's about that constant need to upscale and I suppose forward think and get to where you want to get to faster. So we're in the last quarter. What do I mean by self-assessment and reflection? I start to think about what I've achieved in the year, and this is both in work and outside of work. Have I done everything that I set out to do? Have I achieved everything I set out to achieve? And you've got to be genuinely honest with your outlook. Don't allow yourself the ability to say that you've done okay, so that's fine. You can kind of move on. You have to look at each element in its entirety and fully appreciate whether you've maximized what you can potentially do or have done or haven't done. So it's got to be an honest appraisal. And I think you've got to be relatively strict with it and not let yourself off the hook. I think far too often we as human beings always take the path of least resistance. We like the ability to be in our comfort zone, and we like things to be nice and steady and relatively easy. But if you're looking to continually develop and push on and achieve new goals and targets, you've got to constantly push the boundaries, and you've got to not be happy staying in a comfort zone. You've got to want to push past that. As they say, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And that's not a position that I want to be in. So I look at things, and it can be down to various KPIs. It can be down to stats. It could be understanding and assessing how many sales calls you've done this year. What do you average per week, per day? And you do this for each element. How many CVs do you get out per week? How many interviews do you arrange? And whatever you do in terms of your vocation, your life, and everything else, it's about breaking it down into smaller parts. And for me, I always like to look at what I've averaged this year. So what has been the average in terms of my outward sales or outbound sales and my achievements. And then I like to look at going into next year, and whatever the average scores have been this year, they become the minimum acceptance for next year. So I've constantly improved. It might be that I look at better ways of doing certain things or pushing in a different direction because that one worked particularly well this year. So the growth of the personal brand has been huge this year. And obviously following on from the publication of my new book, an element of that will certainly be bigger and better next year because it has worked so well in terms of results for this year. I like to look at things and think, well, has my motivations changed? Has my personal drive changed in any way? What keeps me going and what keeps me motivated to achieve more? How do I improve how I am as a person? Do I need to go to join the gym? Do I need to set health goals, life goals, work goals? Do I need to have all these in place? The idea behind starting to think about it now isn't necessarily to put things in place now, but what it does is you've got 2 or 3 months where you can start to almost have a practice run, excuse me, and start to implement things that will help and guide you next year. If it's about improvement of that, I'm going to put out 2 social media posts today as part of what I do, and at the moment you're only doing 1, you can start giving yourself small incremental steps now that mean by the time you get to January, it's part of your normal daily setup. And actually, you've got yourself to a position where next year is going to be nothing more than more successful. Um, and I think for me, it's something that I've kind of just built in every year. And I want you as a listener to start thinking about, do you really sit there and assess and review what you've done, who you are, how you react, how you act, how you speak, the words that you use? Have you truly implemented everything that you wanted to do this year? And what are you going to do in terms of next year to make sure that you continually improve? Do you sit there and assess, or start assessing, your weaknesses and your strengths and everything that goes with it? Have you looked at what your average results have looked like this year? Can you make that the minimum return for next year so that your averages naturally increase? Can you put things into practice between now and Christmas that get you ready for a bumper year next year? Do you strive at the end of every year to make sure the following year is going to be bigger and better? And do you build in those 1% incremental changes? That for me is what the final quarter of 2021 is. And I thought you'd make a good podcast and share my thoughts and my ideas for now. It's about building, it's about creating, and it's about going into every year with new goals, new aspirations, and new ways of progressing or getting you to the finish line or where you're heading. I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Let me know. I'm always interested to hear and understand what you're looking to achieve. It will make you accountable. I'm genuinely interested in how people assess themselves and what they do to set themselves up to be bigger and stronger. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.